Ships are an ancient invention, but we still need them today. For all the planes, trains, and automobiles we've ever invented, there are some tasks for which the humble ship is still required. Ships have a shelf life, though, and ships also sometimes encounter misfortune. When they do, they could end up abandoned just about anywhere, as you're about to see. If a ship's not in the water or in a harbor, the most likely place to find one is at the bottom of the ocean. Until this Roman shipwreck was found off the coast of Italy, not far from the town of Varazzi in 2012, it had lain undisturbed for about 2,000 years. Divers decided to go looking for the vessel after hearing anecdotes from fishermen that they'd been dredging up shards of pottery in their nets for several years. Following their instincts turned out to be a good idea. More than 200 amphorae are still aboard the sunken vessel, which is described as being in excellent condition for its age. It's almost fully intact. Experts say that it was likely to have been on a trade route between central Italy and Spain and had a cargo of fish, grain, wine, and oil in its amphorae when it met with disaster. Given the size of the amphorae and their number, it would have been a very expensive loss for whoever paid for the shipment. While it may be technically feasible to raise the wreck, it remains on the seabed more than a decade after the discovery. Fighting the Second World War was enormously expensive for Great Britain, and so the country called upon resources from abroad to support its war efforts. Some would say it even overstepped the mark in doing so. In early 1941, Winston Churchill ordered $200 million worth of silver to be brought back to the country from India, which back then was under British control. The silver was loaded onto a vessel called the SS Gersopa, but it never quite made it back to England. The Gersopa was attacked by a German U-boat and sank off the coast of Ireland, not far from Galway. That was the last anyone saw of it until 2011, when the broken wreck of the vessel was finally found. It was damaged so badly in the sinking incident that it had split wide open, spilling its silver cargo across the seabed. Retrieving the silver was always likely to be difficult, because the wreck sits so deep below the surface. So far, 56 tons have been brought back to dry land. There's still far more to be found, so this deep-sea salvage operation is likely to continue for some time yet. On October 6, 1941, the British munitions ship SS Thistlegor was attacked by a German bomber and sank in the Red Sea. The badly damaged vessel was set on fire by the attack and went down when the fire spread to the ammunition store and caused an explosion. Torn in two, it took the Thistlegor less than a minute to sink, taking all of its cargo down with it. In 2018, German photographer Tobias Friedrich dived down to the wreck and took this picture, which won him the Underwater Photographer of the Year award for 2018. The photo was taken from inside the ship's cargo hold, where we can see a stockpile of Norton 16H motorbikes. Despite the violence of the explosion that sank the vessel, the dozens of motorcycles in the hold are still lined up in perfect formation next to the cars that went down to the bottom of the ocean with them. All of these vehicles, along with uniforms, rifles, steam locomotives, and aircraft parts, were on their way to Alexandria in Egypt when the Thistlegor sank. It was a hugely expensive loss for the Allies. The Titanic is one of the most famous ships in world history, but did you know it had a sister ship? She was known as the Brittanic, and she served as a hospital ship during the First World War. Bad luck must run in the family, though, because just like her famous sibling, the Brittanic is at the bottom of the ocean. It hit a German mine in 1916 and slipped 300 feet below the Aegean Sea's surface, close to the Greek island of Kea. The ship's captain had desperately been trying to reach the island to beach his stricken vessel after hitting the mine, but it was too badly damaged to make it. For more than a century, it barely ever saw a human visitor, and didn't see anyone at all until the legendary French explorer Jacques Cousteau located the shattered hull of the ship in 1975. But all of that has been due to change as of February this year. The Greek government is keen to open up new tourist attractions, and they've realized that the wreck of the Brittanic could make an excellent attraction to organized groups of divers. It's a little ironic for a ship with a name like World Discoverer to get stuck in one part of the world for 20 years, but that's the fate that's befallen this vessel. She had a long and happy life before she met with this misfortune, though. The World Discoverer was built in 1974 in Germany and sold to a Danish company as a cruise liner, and then sold again to another cruise company, this time one based in Singapore. They kept her for 16 years, during which time she traveled the whole world and delighted many passengers. By 1990, she was showing her age, but she was given a full refurbishment and started sailing again in good-as-new condition, this time under the national flag of Liberia. It's possible she might even have survived until today under normal circumstances, but it wasn't to be. She hit a reef close to the Solomon Islands in April 2000, and the damage was severe. All of the passengers were rescued, but her heroic Captain Oliver Croyce chose to remain on board and pilot her to Roderick Bay. That allowed all of the valuables on the ship to be salvaged, but no more could be done for the 26-year-old ship. This shipwreck is well worth seeing if you ever find yourself at Truk Lagoon, an atoll in the Central Pacific Ocean. It's the wreck of a Japanese cargo ship, Fujikawa Maru, built in 1938 and tasked with shipping cotton and silk between India and South America. The ship was requisitioned by the Japanese Navy in 1940 and served in the Second World War. In February 1944, she was battered by U.S. bombers during Operation Hailstone and sank. She went down with 3 Zero fighter planes and had an A-6M fighter still aboard, and has since become one of the most visited wreck diving sites in the world. Today it's covered by pink and white coral and surrounded by tuna, but many of the objects inside the shattered hull of the vessel are still in one piece. Amazingly, that includes all of the planes. If the A-6M could be raised to the surface, it would be the only one of its kind still in existence. But sadly, that would be impossible without causing significant damage to the rest of the wreck. It's best left where it is. The coast of Warrenton in Virginia, USA, has become the accidental last resting place of a ship called the Peter Aale. There isn't much of it left, but that's not surprising. It's been stuck here since October 1906. The Peter Aale was on its way to the Columbia River when it ran aground, and it was immediately obvious that she was never going to move again. The force of the impact tore the rear portion of the ship clean away. Her owners considered mounting a salvage operation to reclaim what they could from her materials, but those plans went nowhere. Eventually, they abandoned her and left nature to break apart her battered body. That's taken longer than anyone probably imagined it would at the time. She probably won't last another 100 years, but we're sure the people who saw her 50 years after she was beached thought she wouldn't last another 50. When the tide is out, it's possible to walk right up to the Peter Aale and climb inside it, which some people do for photo opportunities. We're not sure that we'd recommend anyone watching this should do the same, though, as the wreck looks very unstable. In November 2019, a pair of 17th century warships were found at the bottom of a channel in Sweden, and experts believe that one of them might be the sister ship of the famous Swedish vessel Vasa. Vasa was the flagship of King Gustav Adolf of Sweden's war fleet when it launched in August 1628, but sank on its maiden voyage out of Stockholm. That ship was raised in 1961 and is now in a museum. But this vessel, the Applet, is still beneath the waves. The Applet was a luckier ship than Vasa, enjoying a long military career before being deliberately sunk close to Vaxholm as a barrier against potential invasions by the Dutch or the Danes. Years went by, and the ship and its story were forgotten by the public. Historians and divers became interested in attempting to find it 10 years ago, and it now appears that their search is at an end. Based on the size, shape, and design of this shipwreck, it's almost certain that it's the Applet. The identity of the second ship is proving to be something of a mystery. It's degraded badly under the water and doesn't appear to bear any identifying marks. There's a cove on the island of Zakynthos called Shipwreck Bay, and it owes its name to the wreck of the MV Panagiotis. That's a fact, but almost every other aspect of the life of the Panagiotis is a guess. The coaster ship is thought to have been built in Scotland during the late 1930s, serving as a trading vessel for almost 30 years under the name MV St. Bedan, before being sold in 1964 and then sold on again in 1975, which is when she became the Panagiotis under the ownership of a man named Mr. P. Lysikatos. After that, there are no records of her until October 1980, when she was found abandoned in her current location. Lots of people on the island have a theory as to how and why she got there, but the most commonly believed story is that she was being used to transport black market cigarettes back and forth between Turkey and Greece, and was forced into the cove while being pursued by the Greek Navy. The crew fled on foot when the ship ran aground, and the Navy never caught the smugglers. The Navy has denied that version of events, so feel free to make up your own tale. Making ships out of concrete might seem like a counterintuitive idea, but almost every nation involved in the Second World War experimented with that idea when standard shipbuilding materials became hard to acquire. America built a whole fleet of them, and the remains of that fleet can still be found floating in the water at Cape Charles, Virginia. They're known locally as the Ktopic Concrete Fleet. There are 9 of the ships left, all of which are in a state of deep decay. That's not surprising when you consider that they've been here since 1948, when they were written off by the US Navy and then dragged into position to become an artificial barrier around the Chesapeake Bay ferry terminal. By this point, they're fairly useless as a barrier because the gaping holes in their sides are wide enough to sail a smaller vessel straight through. Tourists like to come here occasionally and take pictures with the wrecks for their social media profiles, but they put themselves in danger by doing so. The local authorities consider the wrecks unsafe and warn that they could collapse at any moment. The River Clyde in Scotland features numerous landmarks, but none are as famous as the so-called Sugar Boat Shipwreck. Despite its local fame, though, very few Scots even know its real name. The ship is actually the MV Captayanus, which took a battering during a severe storm on January 27, 1974. She wasn't even sailing down the river at the time. She was moored up with a cargo full of African sugar bound for a refinery in Greenock. The storm ensured that she never made it. Winds of 60 miles per hour ripped the Captayanus away from its moorings and put it adrift. The crew were still aboard, so Captain Theodrakis Ionis ordered the engines to be started and followed emergency protocols to the letter. Sadly, nothing could be done. As he tried to navigate the ship toward the relative shelter of Gairloch, it hit the anchor chains of a huge oil tanker. The chains tore a hole in the side of the Captayanus, and the vessel was doomed. With his ship taking on water, Captain Ioannis ordered the crew to aim for a nearby sandbar. His bold move saved the lives of everyone aboard. The ship ran aground and the crew was rescued. The Captayanus keeled over the next morning and has never moved since. On a clear day in Cape May, New Jersey, USA, you can just about still see the rusting remains of the SS Atlantis poking out above the waterline of Delaware Bay. It would have been completely lost long ago were it not for one very important detail. It's made from concrete. Even the power of the waves struggles to erode concrete, and that's why the skeleton of the ship is just about holding together. As we've already discussed, the United States of America briefly experimented with the idea of building ships out of concrete in the aftermath of the First World War. The cost of the war had taken its toll on the global economy, and steel and other shipbuilding materials were in short supply. Some of the experiments were successful, but the SS Atlantis wasn't one of them. It snapped loose from its moorings during a storm in 1926, ran aground, and became stuck fast. It was immediately obvious that hauling a ship so heavy free of its predicament was impossible, and so the Atlantis was declared a total loss. In the near century since then, it's been slowly slipping into the bay, becoming one with the rocks beneath it.
Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!